don't need a dietitian for it. All you need is a little bit of honesty with yourself. The information is all out there. So we are experimenting with a new kind of format. We're trying to have a dialogue. So usually it's a monologue of mine, and that can get pretty boring pretty fast. So I've got somebody else to carry the other end of the conversation. So Kailas is holding that role today. Kailas is an old friend. We've met online, never met in person. But yeah, we sync on a lot of issues. So Kailas is going to be asking questions and uh, conducting the interview.
Thanks for having me, Louis. While I followed your posts on FB and blogs, I'm sure I'll have more to learn and adopt from this conversation. There's just so much information out there and conflicting and flawed information too. As much as this is an information age, it's also a misinformation age. Looking back at my own fitness journey, there are things I wish someone had explained to me earlier. And those questions I'll try to pose here in an attempt to make this video a primer for someone looking to get started on fitness. Since you are someone who doesn't mince words, how about we start with something controversial? Fats. For far too long, the popular belief is that eating fat makes you fat. I mean, we now know it's an oversimplification, if not untrue per se. So, what's the deal here? Too many people seem to falter by trying to completely avoid fats in their diet and still struggling to lose weight.
There is an element of truth to when they say fat makes you fat, because fat is very energy dense. There's a lot of calories in a small unit of small volume of fat. So if you eat too much fat, it does make it difficult for you to lose weight. But it's not the only factor that goes into account when you start thinking about how fat makes you fat, or how fat makes it easy for you to lose weight, because the other side also happens. So consuming fat might make it easier for you to lose weight, and uh, that that is because fat is very satiating. It makes you feel full earlier. So if you eat a small quantity of fat, you might not feel as hungry later on, and it might let you reduce the amount of calories you consume. So that is useful. And the other reason why fat seems to help is because fat doesn't have a very strong anabolic response. It doesn't cause a lot of release of insulin. And insulin is what helps you uh, deposit fat. So because fat doesn't cause that insulin release, you can consume a bit of it and not trigger the body to um, generate more fat, to produce more fat. So that's why fat doesn't necessarily make you fat. So just because it's true biochemically, it doesn't mean the same thing is going to happen when you consume it, because the way you consume it will then decide what your appetite is going to do, what your hunger is going to do, and it's also going to influence your hormonal profile, and that might help you to burn more fat or consume less calories. So it will really depend on how the person responds to fat. And me personally, and for most of my patients who are put on a higher fat diet or low carbohydrate diet, they seem to do better because their hunger is controlled and their insulin resistance is controlled. So they produce less insulin and they can burn fat better. I've found that between multiple kinds of diets that people use, the lower carb, higher fat diet seems to be most easy to follow.
Surely, this is not a free pass for someone to consume fats without restriction. We've heard everywhere that not all fats are equal. Instead of asking you what's okay to consume, how about uh, you go over what to avoid? At this point, for our viewers, I think it's necessary to add a disclaimer that this list is obviously not going to be exhaustive. And if you don't spot your favorite food mentioned by Lewis as better avoid it, it doesn't necessarily mean that food is in some approved list and you can just go at it. With that done, so over to you, Lewis. What sort of fat is better avoided?
Fat you consume when you're frying something is fat in combination with something else, which is usually a carbohydrate, which is usually flour based. It's going to be vada, or it's going to be a samosa, or if it's puri, whatever. All of these are carbohydrates in combination with whatever cooking oil you're using. Now, if the so that combination of fat and carbohydrate is very tasty, as we all know, and we tend to overeat that kind of stuff. So that is in one way why fried foods are causing trouble, and the other way it causes of fried food causes problems is depending on which cooking oil you're using. So if you're using a cooking oil that has a very high smoke point, for example, coconut oil. Coconut oil doesn't have a it has a very high smoke point. It can tolerate heat better. It doesn't get denatured as easily as with something like olive oil maybe, or even vegetable oils. All of these have a much lower smoke point, and they are unsaturated fats, and they tend to get affected by the heat earlier, and the unsaturated fats can then cause inflammation in the body after being heated, and that can again trigger your body to start holding on to fat better. It can create a stress response, and that stress response can ask your body to hold on to fat better. So fried foods aren't exactly harmless. What we are talking about are fats that are occurring naturally in foods. So, for example, a fatty piece of meat or a fatty fish or some eggs with fat. So, yolk is there's quite a bit of fat in yolk. Or if it's butter or ghee that you are adding onto your vegetable salad, or you're cooking something in butter or ghee or coconut oil, the amount of fat you're consuming is not that high, but that small amount of fat that you consume is going to keep your stomach full, and is going to keep your appetite controlled, and that is then going to help you to reduce consumption.
That's a lot of information, Lewis. I remember being overwhelmed when I started reading more and trying to assimilate all of this a couple of years back. Now, hopefully, some parts of this discussion will act as a springboard for some viewers to go research and then act on bettering their diet. Before we get into the second part of the discussion, which will be on working out exercises, um, Lewis, what has your own experience been like with diets? I know you experimented yourself, and it might be interesting for viewers to get a glimpse into that.
So I've tried going low fat myself, and I've failed, like most of us. So uh, when you get worried about consuming fat, you start consuming carbohydrates usually, and then that carbohydrate is usually refined, and that is usually going to make you fatter. So, which is why most of us fail when we try and control fat and increase our carbohydrates. It's a very tough thing to do. There are people who can pull it off, but the vast majority of people will do better on a higher fat and a lower carbohydrate diet, especially in the modern environment when we are not physically as active as our ancestors.
We have so far introduced one pillar of fitness, that of consumption, and actually more specifically address the fat question. There's a lot more under the surface, but I realize this video is meant to be an introduction, rather an introduction to fitness. So we'll perhaps discuss other aspects of diet another day and now move to the other pillar, which is about exercise, working out. Here too, Lewis, let me prod the discussion with another myth buster. Most people grossly overestimate how many calories their favorite exercise actually burns, and they are shocked when they see the actual numbers. Lewis, you're a fitness enthusiast yourself. Please throw some light on whether one can actually lose excess fat by a typical 45-minute exercise routine.
I never use exercise to burn calories. I am exercising only for strength benefits, flexibility benefits, or mental benefits. I've stopped trying to burn calories. That just doesn't work, because I'll give you an example. if you walk for an hour, you're probably going to burn around 70 or 100 calories, I think. And then if you drink a tea with some sugar in it, that's your 70 calories. So an hour's worth of walking is destroyed by just a cup of tea, which you can finish off in 5 minutes. So you can, our digestive system is super efficient. It can help you absorb so many calories that you'll never be able to burn it off. Uh, for example, okay, let's see. The only people that have, the only population that I've seen that can lose weight exercising are people who do the Tour de France, 8 to 10 hours of cycling a day at very high power output. So those people can lose weight. So they'll be consuming 7,000 calories and they'll still be losing weight. You're not going to be able to exercise that much because the human body will break down much earlier. The musculoskeletal system will break down much before the digestive system can break down. So you'll never be able to compensate for a bad diet by burning calories. So the whole idea of exercise should be to get stronger, make your heart and lungs more efficient, become more flexible, and give you mechanisms to control your stress and make your body more resilient. That should be the aim for exercise. Burning calories, not much. So you're going to need at least 40 minutes of walking a day. That's crucial. You're going to need at least 15 to 20 minutes of resistance training. Uh, and that can be something like push-ups, pull-ups, and squats, or whatever weights you're doing. And that's pretty much it. Now, if you want extra goals, you can think of flexibility, so spending time on the floor or um, that kind of thing. So a minimum effective dose, if you want to stay healthy, I want you to be able to walk regularly for minimum 40 minutes a day, and I would like you to do at least 20 to 30 minutes thrice a week of resistance training. And it has to be structured. So you need to cover all parts of the body. You shouldn't be focusing on just a bench press, or you shouldn't be focusing on just squats. So I would like you to do an upper body push, an upper body pull, a lower body push, a lower body pull, some amount of core training, some amount of grip training. So you need to have a plan for that. Um, but if it's just cardiovascular strength or cardiovascular exercise you're looking at, you can make do with 40 minutes a day. And if you want to
Okay.
do flexibility training, so you can just spend more time sitting on the floor instead of sitting in chairs. That'll do. Yeah. So summary of this thing is just exercise is going to be at least 30 to 40 minutes of walking daily and 20 to 30 minutes of resistance training twice or thrice a week.
Like everything else with respect to the human body or medicine, for a layman, a discussion can very easily get overwhelming. Lewis, we discussed just before the recording that we should keep the content easily digestible, and pardon the pun. So, based on the response to this video, I would love to dig a bit deeper into more specific topics and explore more on diet, fitness, and health in general. Thanks for giving me the role of the interviewer for this one, and see you soon.
Let's see what the follow-up questions are like, and what they'd like us to talk about. And then if they ask those questions, and then we can talk in detail. So